There's a quiet lie sitting at the center of modern retirement advice. It doesn't scream. It doesn't look dangerous. In fact, it often comes dressed as guidance, responsible, even helpful. The lie sounds simple. Save a big number, hit a target, and you'll be fine. If you don't hit that number, you must be behind. And if you are behind, you should feel nervous, maybe even ashamed. That idea quietly shapes the way you judge yourself. It nudges you to stare at one big balance and treat it like a report card. It makes you compare your life to strangers on the internet. And worst of all, it can make a solid retirement feel shaky when it isn't. Here's the thing. Most retirement plans get the main question wrong. The real question isn't how big your savings looks on paper. It's how much reliable income your life can count on when work stops. Think of retirement like a house. Your income floor is the foundation buried under the ground, holding everything up when no one else can see it. Your savings is more like the furniture, useful, valuable, and sometimes beautiful, but still sitting on top of that foundation. If the foundation is strong, the house can feel calm even without fancy furniture. That is why so many people feel confused. They are measuring the couch, the table, and the lamps, while ignoring the concrete underneath. A person with less saved can quietly feel secure. A person with much more saved can still lie awake at night. It's not about who has more saved. It's about who has more certainty. And certainty rarely comes from staring at a giant account number by itself. It comes from knowing what will show up every month, what will go out every month, and what gap is left. Let me just say, if this content resonates with you, the subscribe button is right there. I never waste my viewers' time. And if you've ever felt behind, even while doing everything you were told to do, keep listening, because this may change how you see your retirement completely. Let me show you what I mean with two real-life types of retirees. Tom is 67. He spent 38 years teaching middle school, lives in a modest paid-off house, and has about $212,000 saved. Nothing flashy, nothing that makes people at parties lean in with envy. Steve is 65. He worked as a regional sales manager, did well for himself, and built his retirement account up to $940,000. He and his wife still have a mortgage on a larger home, plus a newer SUV payment, and they like to travel often. On paper, almost everyone would say Steve is winning, but watch their mornings. Tom makes coffee slowly, pays his bills online once a month, and rarely checks the market. His pension lands, his Social Security lands. Most of his core expenses are already covered before he even touches his savings. Steve wakes up and checks headlines. If the market is down, his shoulders tighten before breakfast. He tells himself he has plenty, but he also knows a bad stretch early in retirement could force hard choices. Every extra withdrawal feels bigger than it used to. Now listen, the account balance gave you one story. Their income gave you the real one. And that is where so many retirement plans quietly break, because they focus on wealth display instead of income durability. I want to know, have you ever compared your retirement plan to someone else's and felt behind? That feeling isn't always accurate. Sometimes it has more to do with the measuring stick than your actual future. Keep that in your head, because we're going to come back to it. Imagine your retirement in two distinct piles. Pile 1 is income that keeps showing up no matter what, like Social Security, a pension, or a steady annuity payment. Pile 2 is your savings, the pile you tap when you want or need more. Most people spend their whole life obsessing over Pile 2 while barely understanding Pile 1. And Pile 1 matters more than most people realize, because Pile 1 lowers pressure on Pile 2. When your basic bills are covered by monthly income, your savings gets to breathe. It lasts longer, grows more quietly, and doesn't have to rescue you every single month. That is why Social Security timing matters so much. Not because there is one perfect age for everyone, but because the age you claim changes the size of that monthly check for the rest of your life. And that decision silently shapes how hard your savings has to work. Think of your Social Security benefit like a faucet. Behind that faucet is a pipe, one you've been filling your entire working life through payroll taxes. Turn it on at 62, and the flow starts sooner, but it comes out smaller each month. Wait until full retirement age, often around 67, and the flow gets stronger. Wait until 70, and the faucet opens even more. You do not get a bonus because someone likes you. You get a bigger lifelong monthly payment because you waited longer to start the stream. That one choice can change the pressure on the rest of your plan for decades. For many people, claiming at 62 can cut the monthly benefit by around 30% compared with full retirement age. Waiting from full retirement age to 70 can raise it by about 8% a year. That is not a tiny tweak. That is a permanent change to your income floor. And Social Security has another feature people often forget. It usually gets cost of living adjustments, often called COLA, which is just a simple way of saying the payment can rise with inflation. Not perfectly, not enough to erase every cost increase, but it does give you a built-in lift many withdrawals from savings do not have. Let that sink in. A bigger guaranteed check that can rise over time is not just income. It is pressure relief. It means fewer shares sold in a downturn, less guessing every year, and less fear when prices quietly creep upward. That matters more than many people think. Let me ask you something. Do you know what your monthly income will actually look like when you retire? Be honest with yourself. Not the account value, not the hope, the monthly income. Now let's talk about pensions, because this is where people misjudge themselves all the time. A pension can be so familiar that you stop seeing how valuable it really is. It just looks like a monthly payment. But in retirement terms, that payment can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Think about it this way. If someone handed you a machine that paid you $1,500 or $2,000 every month for life, you would call that a major asset. But when that same value arrives as a pension, many people shrug. They say, well, I only have $200,000 saved, and miss the giant support beam standing right beside them. Tom does not miss it anymore. His teacher pension is about $1,800 a month. His Social Security is about $2,300 because he waited until 67. Between those two checks, the basics of his life are largely handled before his savings gets invited into the conversation. Steve has a different picture. His Social Security will be decent, but he wants to claim at 65 because he is tired of work. He has no pension. So even with nearly $1 million saved, more of his groceries, utilities, travel, insurance, and property costs must come from the market. Do you see what happened there? Tom looks smaller in the savings column, but stronger in the income column. Steve looks stronger in the savings column, but carries more uncertainty month to month. This is why perceived data and real data are often miles apart in retirement. Perceived data is what looks good at first glance. A large 401k, a round number. A feeling that more must mean safer. Real data is what your bank account, mailbox, and bills say when no paycheck from work is coming anymore. Here's something most people never consider. Do you know the difference between what you need and what you want in retirement? That question changes everything, because if you treat every expense like a must-have, your target gets bigger than your actual life. And bigger targets create bigger fear. This is where the big number myth starts to crack. You hear that you need 1 million or 1.5 million or some giant number that sounds official, and suddenly your whole future gets judged by whether you hit that sticker. But retirement doesn't happen on a billboard. It happens in monthly cash flow. Imagine walking onto a car lot. Every vehicle has a sticker price. Bold, official, almost intimidating. It looks final, but nobody pays the sticker without asking what the real terms are, what the trade-in is, what the monthly cost will be. Retirement numbers work the same way. $1 million is a sticker number. It tells you almost nothing by itself about whether your life works. A person with 1.2 million and high monthly costs can be in trouble. A person with 250,000 and strong guaranteed income can be steady. Here is another problem. Most people quietly underestimate expenses, not because they are careless, because retirement spending is tricky. Some costs drop, like commuting and work clothes, while others nudge higher, like travel, gifts, hobbies, home repairs, and healthcare. A lot of people think their spending will magically fall the day they retire. Sometimes it does, but often the first years are busy years. You visit family more, you eat out more, you finally fix the kitchen faucet, the fence, the tires, the things you kept postponing, and then inflation shows up. Inflation is like an ice cube in the sun. It doesn't melt all at once. It quietly erodes what your dollars can buy, raising the price of groceries, insurance, taxes, repairs, and medicine a little at a time. That is why a retirement plan built only on a big savings number can feel fine at first, and then weaken silently. If your withdrawals must keep rising just to buy the same life, the math changes. Not in one dramatic moment, in a slow, creeping way that is easy to ignore until it hurts. Healthcare is one of the biggest places people get surprised. Even if Medicare covers a lot, it does not cover everything. There are premiums, drug costs, dental work, vision needs, co-pays, and the random expenses nobody plans for. One tough year can change your comfort level fast. Tom knows this, which is why he likes having his basics covered before market money enters the picture. His savings is not there to carry the whole house. It is there to handle the extra things. That changes the feeling of every decision he makes. Steve feels the opposite pressure. He knows his account is big, but he also knows it is the engine for much more of his lifestyle. So when inflation creeps, when insurance rises, when the roof needs work, it all points back to the same pile of money. That invisible weight is real. Quick question. Have you ever felt guilty about spending money in retirement? A lot of people do. Even people with more than enough. Because if every dollar feels like it is leaving a shrinking pile, spending can feel like damage instead of living. That guilt is often a clue. It tells you your plan may be too savings-centered and not income-centered. When people have a stronger monthly floor, they often spend more calmly, not recklessly, just without the same quiet fear. Now let's go one layer deeper, because most retirement plans also get survivor planning wrong. And this matters even more if you are married. A plan can look fine while both spouses are alive and then change overnight when one person is gone. That shift is rarely discussed enough. Many couples assume expenses get cut in half when one spouse dies. They usually don't. Some things fall, yes, but housing, utilities, taxes, maintenance, and many household costs remain stubbornly high. Meanwhile, one Social Security check often disappears, and that can be a real shock. If you and your spouse both receive Social Security, the smaller benefit usually goes away when one of you dies. The surviving spouse keeps the larger one. That is better than losing both, but it still means household income can drop at the exact moment life is emotionally hardest. That is not a detail, that is a planning issue. Pensions can create similar choices. Some pensions pay more while both of you are alive only if you choose a survivor option. That option usually means taking a slightly smaller check now so your spouse is protected later. Not exciting, but deeply important. Tom and his wife talked through this before he retired. They chose a pension option that would keep income flowing if he dies first. It meant a little less now, but it bought peace. And peace is not a small thing when you are planning for the person you love most. Steve and his wife have had pieces of the conversation, but not the whole thing. They know there is life insurance. They know there is a large account, but they have never fully walked through what the monthly picture looks like if one person is gone. That missing conversation quietly creates risk. This is why I keep saying retirement planning is not just arithmetic. It is emotional architecture. It is building a life that still stands when something sad, costly, or unexpected happens. A spreadsheet can show totals. It cannot automatically show resilience. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? Not in a vague way. I mean real numbers, real bills, real income, real choices. That conversation can be uncomfortable, but it can also be incredibly loving. Now let me bring in one of the most misunderstood risks in retirement. It has a technical name, sequence of returns risk. Do not let the term scare you. It simply means bad market returns early in retirement can hurt you more than bad returns later. Think of it like climbing into a lifeboat with supplies. If a storm hits on day one and half your supplies get washed overboard, the rest of the trip feels dangerous. If the same storm hits near the end, you have already used the boat for years. The timing changes the damage. That is what happens when you retire and the market drops early. If you are taking withdrawals at the same time your investments are falling, you may be forced to sell at lower prices. Those shares are gone. They cannot rebound for you later because you already spent them. Steve is more exposed to that problem than Tom. Why? Because Steve depends more heavily on withdrawals from his account to run his everyday life. If the market drops 20% in his first 2 years and he still needs the same monthly spending, the damage compounds. Tom is not immune to market drops. No one is. But because his pension and Social Security cover more of his basics, he can give his investments more time to recover. He does not need to yank money out of the market with the same urgency. That flexibility has real value. This is another reason income beats image. A big account can impress people. A stable income can protect you. Those are not the same thing. And retirement security is built on protection, not applause. Some retirees create extra safety by holding 1 to 3 years of cash for near-term spending. That way, if markets fall, they are not forced to sell investments right away. It is not magic. It is just creating breathing room. And breathing room often makes better decisions possible. Others lower risk by being flexible with optional spending. Maybe the big trip waits a year. Maybe the kitchen remodel moves slower. Maybe gifts get smaller during rough market years. That is not failure. That is adaptability. And adaptability is one of the strongest traits you can bring into retirement. Quick question for you. If your retirement income was completely guaranteed for life, would you feel different right now? Most people would. And that answer tells you something important. It tells you that certainty, not just size, is what your nervous system is really searching for. There is also a tax side to all of this. Not every dollar in retirement is equally spendable. Money in a traditional retirement account may still owe taxes when you withdraw it. So a $700,000 balance is not always $700,000 of lifestyle. Part of it already belongs elsewhere. That is why raw totals can mislead you. A paid-off house, a pension, lower taxes, and smaller monthly needs can beat a giant account with high fixed costs. Again, the real question isn't who looks richer. It's who can cover life with the least strain and the most confidence. And confidence matters more than many experts admit. Numbers matter, of course, but how you feel about those numbers shapes how you use them. People with shaky confidence often underspend, overworry, or delay joy. People with clarity tend to make steadier decisions. You don't need perfection to have a successful retirement. You need clarity. You need to know what is fixed, what can change, what rises with inflation, what disappears at death, and what happens if markets misbehave early. That is a very different goal from just chasing the biggest possible pile. Let me ask you this. If you could go back 10 years, what would you do differently with your retirement planning? Most people answer that with saving more. But a surprising number also say they would have learned earlier how income works, how claiming decisions work, and how little giant target numbers actually explain. So what do you do with all of this? How do you turn it into something useful, not just interesting? You start by shifting the frame. Stop asking, how much do I have? Before you ask, what income does my life require? Sit down and write your real monthly retirement budget. Not the fantasy version, not the panic version, the real version. Housing, food, utilities, insurance, transportation, healthcare, taxes, and the small comforts that make life feel like yours. Then separate that budget into needs and wants. Needs are the lights, the roof, the prescriptions, the groceries, the baseline of your life. Wants are the extras, the nicer trips, the bigger gifts, the upgraded car, the things that matter but can bend. That separation is powerful because it shows you what truly must be covered. After that, map your income floor. Look at Social Security at 62, full retirement age, and 70. Look at any pension. Look at any part-time work you may actually want, not work you feel forced to do. Now you can see how much of your needs are covered before touching savings. If you have a pension, do not treat it like a side note. Price it in your mind like the asset it really is. Ask yourself what amount of savings would be needed to safely produce that same monthly income for life. For many people, the answer is much bigger than they guessed. Then pressure test your plan. Run the ugly version. What if inflation stays stubborn for a few years? What if the market falls early? What if one spouse dies first? What if a health issue raises spending? A plan that only works in perfect weather is not a plan. If you are married, do a survivor drill. I know that sounds cold, but it is actually one of the kindest things you can do. Write down what income remains for the surviving spouse. Write down which expenses stay, which fall, and what decisions would need to happen fast. Also, look at your housing honestly. A paid-off, modest home can quietly be one of the strongest retirement tools you own. A beautiful house with a big payment can silently trap cash flow. This is not about judging your taste. It is about understanding the monthly weight you are asking your future self to carry. And watch out for lifestyle inertia. That is just a simple way of saying you keep spending like your working years are still in motion. Subscriptions, second cars, too much house, automatic upgrades, habits you no longer need. These things do not scream. They quietly nibble away at flexibility. You can also create peace by deciding in advance how you will handle bad market years. Maybe you pause optional spending. Maybe you use cash reserves. Maybe you delay a large purchase. Maybe one spouse does part-time work by choice for a season. Pre-deciding beats panic every time. Here's something to think about. If you found out today that you're actually on track, how would that change your week? Would you breathe deeper? Would you stop doom-scrolling retirement articles at midnight? Would you talk to your spouse differently? Would you start planning a life instead of just defending against disaster? Because that is what this is really about. Retirement is not just a math problem. It is a life design problem. The money matters because the life matters. The point is not to win a savings contest. The point is to build enough stability that your days feel open again. Tom understood this slowly. He did not feel rich when he retired. He felt ordinary. But ordinary turned out to be strong. His checks arrived, his bills got paid, his withdrawals stayed modest, and his anxiety stayed low because the structure underneath him was sound. Steve is not doomed. Not even close. But he has work to do that his account balance alone cannot do for him. He may need to delay claiming, trim some fixed costs, rethink timing, and build a stronger income base. His situation is not hopeless. It is simply less finished than it looks. That is an important difference. A lot of people think the answer to retirement stress is more saving forever. Sometimes the answer is better structure. Sometimes it is a smarter claiming decision. Sometimes it is lower fixed expenses. Sometimes it is finally seeing the pension and Social Security for the powerhouse they are. Stop measuring yourself against everyone else. Start focusing on what truly gives you freedom. Freedom is not a round number on a screen by itself. Freedom is waking up and knowing the basics of your life are funded without constant fear. Real data beats perceived data every time. Real data asks what comes in each month, what goes out each month, what rises with inflation, and what happens if one thing breaks. Perceived data asks whether your total sounds impressive. Only one of those approaches can help you sleep better. And let me say something else. There are people with $1.5 million who still feel behind because their costs are too high and their income floor is too weak. There are people with 200,000 who feel calm because their home is paid off, their pension is steady, and their spending fits their life. The number alone does not finish the story. That is why the million-dollar myth can be so harmful. It gives you a destination without a map. It makes you chase a headline instead of understanding your own terrain. And if the system only rewards you with almost enough, you can spend your whole life chasing more, while missing the fact that your version of enough may already be within reach. I want to throw this out there. What's the one thing about retirement that worries you most? For a lot of people, once they answer that honestly, the next step becomes clearer, because the fear usually points to the weak spot, and weak spots can often be strengthened when you finally name them. Think about this. There are people with millions of dollars who don't feel secure, and there are people with modest savings who sleep soundly every night. The difference isn't the number. The difference is understanding. Understanding your income, understanding your expenses, understanding what inflation quietly erodes and what COLA can help protect, understanding how Social Security timing changes the rest of the plan, understanding how survivor choices affect the person who may one day need that protection most, understanding whether your savings is a support beam or the entire roof, understanding whether your lifestyle is flexible or rigid, understanding whether a market drop would be painful or devastating, understanding whether you are paying attention to the right score. That is the difference between stress and peace. So if most retirement plans get this wrong, here is the fix. Build your thinking around income first, expenses second, savings third. Not because savings is unimportant, but because savings works best when it supports a stable structure instead of carrying the whole weight alone. That small shift can change almost every decision that follows. If this video made you think differently about your retirement, subscribe. The next one goes even deeper. And more importantly, keep going with your own numbers until they feel clear, honest, and usable. Because clarity is what turns retirement from a vague fear into a life you can actually trust.